Did you know that a time traveler from Azalea Town made an appearance in Pokémon Crystal? Or that there's a parallel world inside Pokémon Crystal where a ghost girl resides? Since you enjoy the Gen 1 Pokémon Anomalies Iceberg, consider this my response to your kind support. In this Iceberg, we'll explore the mysteries, out-of-place elements, beta elements, and obscure facts surrounding one of the most beloved pairs of Pokémon games and its remakes, as well as Pokémon Stadium 2. Welcome to the Gen 2 Pokémon Anomalies Iceberg.
Say my name. Iceberg. You're goddamn right.
Skateboard. Introducing the skateboard as a new means of transportation. In Pokémon Red, Green and Blue, the main character uses a bicycle as a convenient means of transportation for catching Pokémon. In Pokémon 2, skateboards will appear as a new means of transportation in addition to the bicycles that appeared in Red, Green and Blue. In the world of Pokémon 2, a skateboard may take you to some unexpected places. This is part of the information we find archived from the Japanese Nintendo website as it appeared in June 1997, describing many of the features of the back then new Pocket Monsters 2 game. The skateboard happened to be present in the Space World 97 demo, although not fully programmed by that point. Taking into account that it would take the player to unexpected places, it seems that this feature was carried over to Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire in the form of the Acrobike. Brick Piece. Nuggets and star pieces are useful items when it comes to obtaining money, and we can find them across many of the regions in the Pokémon world. There are other less valuable items like pearls and stardust, but there's one in Generation 2 and I never got to see one when I used to play Pokémon Gold, and that's because the only way to get it is to transfer a very specific Pokémon from Gen 1 to Pokémon Gold, Silver and Crystal. The Pokémon in question is Machop, and it'll be holding a brick piece, an item that you can sell for 25 Poké Dollars. Nothing more, nothing less. Old Man and Machop in Vermilion City. One of the most iconic NPCs in Vermilion City is the old man whose Machop is preparing a plot of land for constructing a building in Pokémon Red, Blue and Yellow. Considering that 3 years have passed in Gen 2, you would at least expect this building to be on its initial stage, but in fact, we can find the same old man with his Pokémon stating that he's been preparing the land for construction, but that he doesn't have enough money to start building. I wonder if we'll ever see this building finished in future Kanto Pokémon games. Lugia doesn't have a hold item. Balance is an important element when it comes to choosing which Pokémon game we buy. Ho-Oh and Lugia are two legendary flying Pokémon that fill different roles competitively, but that have the same base stat. However, Ho-Oh has something that Lugia hasn't had since Generation 2, and that is a hold item. The Sacred Ash is a very unique item, as it revives and restores the HP of all the Pokémon in your party. Considering that Ho-Oh is holding this item, you would expect Lugia to hold one as well. But the reality is that Lugia doesn't have any signature item. Even in Fire Red, Leaf Green and Emerald, while Ho-Oh is not exactly holding the Sacred Ash, you can find it on the mountain where you battle it. But if you go to the depths of Naval Rock, no item can be found. This reminds me a bit of the fact that Kyogre was superior to Groudon in terms of typing, although this balancing issue was fixed in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Cerulean Cave and the Berserk Gene. The Cerulean Cave is one of the most iconic locations in Gen 1, as it's the place where Red catches Mewtwo, and it's also home to extremely powerful Pokémon. It was very disappointing to realize that the cave collapsed in Gold, Silver and Crystal, although nobody knows under what circumstances. Although Mewtwo and the cave are absent in these games, there's an object we can find with the item finder in the form of the Berserk Gene. The Berserk Gene is a very unique item, as it only appears in Generation 2, and it increases the attack of the user by 2 stages, but it confuses it, acting as a self-inflicted swagger. I have mentioned it before, but the reason why I think it was removed in Gen 3 is because certain Pokémon have the ability on Tempo that prevents confusion, even if it's self-inflicted. If a Pokémon with this ability is holding the Berserk Gene, just by sending it into battle would give it a +2 attack, making the game pretty unbalanced. Lucky Slot Machine at the Game Corner. There's an NPC at the game corner in Goldenrod City who says that the specific slot machine he's playing on pays out more than the others. In the mornings, the NPC will be absent, leaving the slot machine free for us to confirm this theory. And in fact, he's telling the truth. Every slot machine has a 1 in 6 chance of entering a mode with enhanced odds, but the one he uses always has this advantage. Koga in the Elite Four. In the span of 3 years, a lot of things can happen, and this is precisely the case when we play Gold, Silver and Crystal. Before we even revisit the Kanto region, we know that Koga stepped down his position as the gym leader of Fuchsia City because we face him at the Elite Four. At least to me, the fact that Koga is part of the Elite Four seems a bit random, because he's not exactly known for being a difficult opponent unlike Sabrina. Now that I think about it, a gym leader skill is not necessarily tied to the level of the Pokémon they use at their respective gyms, so maybe Koga actually happens to be the most skilled gym leader in Kanto, and considering he's a ninja that poisons his opponents and uses double team to avoid being hit, it's no wonder. Unown Dex messages. After the player catches at least 3 different Unown, a scientist will install the Unown mode on their Pokédex. This mode shows all forms of Unown, but something that has always drawn my attention are the words under each Unown letter. Examples of this are angry, chase, vanish, and whatever this is. I've always wondered if these words are required to solve some kind of mystery or uncover a secret message. What exactly were they thinking at Game Freak when they came up with these specific words? Radio signals. In Gens 2 and 4, we get access to the Pokegear, a device that allows us, among other things, to listen to the radio. We can tune in to specific stations, but as expected, some others will be completely silent. This, however, changes when we go to the ruins of Ulf, where we'll be able to listen to the mysterious Unown trying to communicate something. These sounds could have some sort of connection to Arceus and Ho-Oh, as they're quite similar to the sounds the Azure Flute emits, as well as Ho-Oh's cry. Another mysterious signal can be heard if you go to the Lake of Rage during Team Rocket's invasion. These sounds are apparently caused by the electromagnetic waves that cause Magikarp to evolve into the Red Gyarados. Forced evolution. The Red Gyarados doesn't make a lot of sense. You have a common Magikarp that, due to being forced to evolve prematurely, had no time to change its scales color to blue. On the other, you have a shiny golden Magikarp that naturally evolves into a Red Gyarados. This forced evolution was caused by electromagnetic waves used by Team Rocket, and it actually makes me wonder what would any other Pokemon look like had they been affected by these waves. Either it is a complete coincidence that both shiny and non-shiny Magikarp evolve into red-colored versions of their evolution, or this is just an oversight. Johto Pokemon in Kanto. We know that Johto Pokemon can be found in Kanto and vice versa, but this entry refers to the fact that the Johto Pokemon Houndour, Markrow and Slugma can be only found in the Kanto region in Generation 2. This is weird because if there's no way to find them in the wild in Johto, that means that they could be Kanto Pokemon. Of course, it's also possible that they originate in Johto, but due to environmental changes, these Pokemon found shelter in the Kanto region. Question marks type. The question marks type was an anomaly in the Pokemon games for some time, as it belongs to an unknown type that debuted in Pokemon Gold and Silver, just like the bird type in Pokemon Red and Blue, which I mentioned in my Gen 1 Anomalies Iceberg. The question marks type is neutrally effective against all types, and all types are neutrally effective against it. Curse was a move belonging to this type that was also introduced in Gen 2 with the peculiarity that for Ghost Pokemon, it would have the Pokemon's max HP to inflict a curse on the opponent, while on other types, it increased their attack and defense at the cost of their speed. Talking about Ghost Pokemon, Curse is a predecessor of Nail Down, a move that was meant to be the signature attack of Norowara, a voodoo doll-like Pokemon that appeared in the Space World 97 demo, but that, as we know, was scrapped. Another manifestation of this type could be seen in Arceus in Generation 4. This Pokemon has both a normal and a shiny form that represents this type. However, it goes unused in the final game, and it's precisely on this generation when the question marks type was last used. The Whirl Islands War. War has been constantly mentioned in Pokemon games, and that includes Gen 1, 4, 6 and 9. However, when I say Gen 4, I don't mean Sinnoh but Johto, specifically in Soul Silver. It is said that two countries were fighting over the island, and that due to this, Lugia cast lightning bolts to tear the island into 4 parts. If we consider countries as regions, this might remind us of the war that took place between Kalos and another region 3000 years prior to the events of X and Y, but this is not the case, as nowhere during the Kalos War was Lugia present. Graffiti in the Celadon Mansion. This only happens in Pokémon Crystal. If you go to the roof of the Celadon Mansion and press A on this spot, the player will find a graffiti and add a mustache to it. I guess this talks a lot about our character's personality, something unseen in future generations. House for sale. Let me ask you a question. Whenever you were about to enter a house or building in the first Pokemon games, how often did you have to press A to check if you could access said building? Unless you couldn't enter, the answer is probably 0. South of Cerulean City, we can enter a house that belonged to the daycare man in Generation 1, but if you press A in front of the door, a very strange message will display. House for sale. Nobody lives here. I would guess that this message shows up because the daycare was relocated in Goldenrod City in Gold, Silver and Crystal, and it made no sense to have another one in the Kanto region. However, instead of having an empty house, Game Freak decided to house a couple of NPCs there. Differently colored shiny Pokemon. It's true that shiny Pokemon first appeared in Gold and Silver. However, some Pokemon didn't keep their original shiny colors in later generations. One of the most well-known examples is shiny Charizard. While we're now used to seeing this fire-flying type Pokemon in black, its original shiny form featured a purple body with green wings. Another Pokemon that underwent a drastic change is Rapidash, which originally had purple flames instead of the grey ones we're accustomed to nowadays. Dragonite is another popular case, given that it's an infamous shiny Pokemon for featuring what many consider an ugly shade of green. This, however, changed with its Mega Evolution in Legend C2A, as its colors are quite faithful to its previous stages. Shiny Pokemon in Pokémon Stadium 2. Shiny Pokemon in the Gen 2 Core Series games were an anomaly because many of them didn't retain their original color in future generations, such as Charizard's case. However, an even bigger anomaly happens in Pokémon Stadium 2, as some Pokemon are shown with radically different colors. One of them is Shiny Lugia, that displays pink plates instead of blue in Gold, Silver and Crystal, but in Stadium 2, these plates are of a light blue color. However, one of the biggest changes is seen on Scyther, because while its Game Boy counterpart barely changes, the one in Pokémon Stadium 2 is red like its evolution Scizor. Here are some examples.
Ooh, this one looks tough. Oh, it's Mewtwo. Will this battler live up to expectations? Typhlosion. It's you. Oh, it's Articuno. Will this Pokemon...
Baby Nidoqueen. Since I spoke about Nidoran male and Nidoran female in my Gen 1 Anomalies Iceberg, I feel like speaking about this because even though it's not related to the games, I don't think I'll have many opportunities to talk about this, but at least it has to do with the second generation of Pokemon. In the Mewtwo Returns special, we can see a couple of Pokemon babies, including Rhyhorn and what seems to be a baby Nidoqueen. This doesn't make sense at all. First, because Nidoqueen is unable to breed, and second, because we're talking about a fully evolved baby Pokemon, which is an oxymoron. Kanto Shiny Legendary Pokemon. As many of you know, shiny Pokemon were introduced in Generation 2, and it led many to believe that only Pokemon obtainable in Pokemon Gold, Silver and Crystal could be shiny. In reality, provided you have a Ditto, you could obtain a lot of Pokemon by hatching them from an egg. However, there were 5 Pokemon that were impossible to obtain in Gen 2, the legendary birds Mewtwo and Mew. I thought these Pokemon didn't have a shiny form because they were confined to the Kanto region, but as we know, they did have alternate colors. I don't think this has ever been documented, but it's quite possible that some players that caught these legendary Pokemon and transferred them to Gold, Silver and Crystal were shocked to realize that they were in possession of an extremely rare Pokemon due to their shininess and different color. This happened because in Gen 1 and 2, shininess was determined by their determinant values. At first glance, you wouldn't realize if a Pokemon is shiny in red, blue and yellow, but if they happen to have very specific stats, you would see this reflected in the form of a shiny Pokemon. If this ever happened to you back in the day, please let me know in the comment section and tell me how it felt to show off this Gen 1 rare Pokemon to your friends. Unused Safari Zone. Pokémon Gold and Silver were very ambitious games, especially for the iconic inclusion of the beloved Kanto region. As expected, due to the cartridge limitations, this region had to leave out several elements of the complete Kanto region of red, blue and yellow to fit in the game without compromising other areas. Sadly, one of the places that was left out was the Safari Zone, but as I said in my Abandoned and Liminal Spaces Iceberg, there's a map of the unused Safari Zone within the game's files. As expected, the place doesn't contain any Pokemon or NPC data, and once the player enters this place, they'll be unable to leave. The Lake of Rage was meant to be a town. In Pokémon Gold, Silver and Crystal, most of the fly locations lead you to towns and cities, with the exception of the Indigo Plateau, Mount Silver and the Lake of Rage. While the first two are important locations that contain battles against Red and the Elite Four, the fact that you can fly to the Lake of Rage doesn't follow the same logic. Although it's possible that this fly location was included because an important event takes place there, there might be another explanation. There's an unused map of the Lake of Rage that depicts the area as a town with its own gym. Since every town and city in the game has a fly location, it's possible that the ability to fly to the Lake of Rage in the final version is a leftover from that earlier design. Vietnamese Crystal. When a bootleg Pokemon game achieves cult status, you know you're witnessing something special. Pokémon Vietnamese Crystal is a bootlegged version of Pokémon Crystal that was translated from Japanese to Chinese to English and distributed in Vietnam. Popularized by Delicious Cinnamon, there's a lot of unintentionally funny dialogues and nonsensical text. Original Legendary Beasts. The legendary beasts are iconic, and one of them made it into the cover of Pokémon Crystal as its mascot. However, before their final design, these Pokémon were quite different. As you can see in the Space World 97 demo Pokédex, Rai and Sui, as they were known back then, were completely different. In fact, Sui actually looks like Nina as a Chimera in Full Metal Alchemist. These Pokémon share the exact same typing as the Pokémon we ended up with, and I sometimes think that this was the original form of the Pokémon that died at the burnt tower before being revived by Ho. I guess this idea has been fed by the fact that Pokémon that looked like actual dogs such as Rai and Sui can be seen succumbing to the tower's fire in Pokémon Generations. Pokémon Silver's potential true mascot. In spite of many of the Pokemon we know originating in the games, Lugia was designed for the anime by chief writer Takeshi Shudo. In the Space World 97 prototype, we see that Ho-Oh is the mascot of the game, with Lugia nowhere to be found for obvious reasons. However, early images of the game show a Pokemon that resembles Arcanine, but bigger and with a huge mane. Considering its quadruped shape, it's been theorized that this Pokemon, known as ID 349, and that happens to come after Ho-Oh and Unown, could have been the true mascot of Pokemon Silver. Even Pokemon that didn't make the final cut have names, at least in Japanese, but ID 349 doesn't have one, and there's not a lot of information about it other than its internal number, its back and front sprites, and the fact that it's probably based on the Koma Inu, entities believed to protect shrines from evil spirits. In spite of this, there's no strong evidence that suggests that this Pokemon was meant to be Pokemon Silver's mascot. Wrong warp in Olivine City. There's an out-of-bounds location in Olivine City that contains a wrong warp, and it will lead us to an unexpected location in the Johto region, or perhaps the Johto region of a parallel universe. If you use a walkthrough walls cheat code and go to this location at the top left of the map in Olivine City, nothing will happen. But if you use an additional code that changes the properties of the tile into that of a hole, you'll fall into the house of an NPC. In this parallel universe, the pharmacy in the Johto region is not located in Cyanwood City but in Ecruteak, as the NPC we find inside this house mentions a pharmacy in the latter. Spiky-eared Pichu's origin. If you have a Pikachu-colored Pichu and interact with the Ilex Forest Shrine, a Spiky-eared Pichu will join the party. This is a very unique Pokemon because according to Professor Elm, same as Celebi, she's been traveling through time. In fact, this is the in-game reason why this Pichu can't be transferred to other Pokemon games outside of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Where and when exactly this Spiky-eared Pichu originates from is a complete mystery. Kanto was a single map. One of the most unique features is the ability to visit another region in the Gen 2 games. However, while in Gold, Silver and Crystal, Kanto is comprised of different maps representing each location in the region, in the Space World 97 prototype, the Kanto region was compressed into a single map, resulting in a very limited version of the region we ended up with. This map shows places such as Palette Town, Lavender Town, two buildings in what appears to be Saffron City, and a single gym that due to its location, seems to be the Pewter City Gym. Thankfully, while the Kanto region feels a bit lonely and reduced in the final version, I think we got the best Kanto we could possibly get back in the day. Kris in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Kris was a groundbreaking character, being the first female playable protagonist in a Pokemon game. Heart Gold and Soul Silver remain among the best entries in the Pokemon franchise, enhancing nearly every aspect of the already acclaimed Gold, Silver and Crystal versions. This raises the question, why wasn't Kris included in the remakes? It is said that this didn't happen because Lyra's designer, Takao Uno, didn't consult Ken Sugimori's original artwork before beginning Lyra's design. In spite of this, there's an unused Pokegear icon for Kris in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but the fact that such an important and representative character such as Kris was left out of one of the best Pokemon games to date makes no sense to me. The Celebi event triggers the plot in Gold and Silver. The popular Celebi event takes place if you have a Fateful Encounter Celebi in your party and you visit the Ilex Forest Shrine. This mythical Pokemon will take you and Lyra to witness the moment Giovanni leaves Silver after being defeated by Red and later to battle him at the Tojo Falls. This battle is crucial for the plot of Gold and Silver because apparently if it hadn't been for the protagonist, Giovanni would have revived Team Rocket himself instead of the Team Rocket executives. This makes me wonder how the events in Pokemon Gold, Silver, Crystal and the remakes would have turned out had Giovanni been the head of Team Rocket in the Johto region. Mega Evolution in Johto is yet to be seen. I was playing Pokémon Legends C2A while thinking about entries for this Iceberg, and I thought, I don't recall seeing a Mega Evolution in the Johto region. Even though Mega Evolution wasn't introduced until Pokémon X and Y, previous regions such as Kanto and Hoenn have seen Pokémon Mega Evolve in their land but Johto. The same goes for Sinnoh, as Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were excessively faithful to the originals, but I hope that if there's a future Johto Pokémon game, we can see Pokémon Mega Evolve, especially since there are many Pokémon from the Johto region that can go through it. Pink Butterfree. Come to think of it, I've seen a pink Butterfree. These are the words spoken by Ace Trainer Lois at the Lake of Rage, referring to the sighting of the red Gyarados. This is a very interesting statement because while shiny Butterfree today is mainly dark blue with green eyes, there are two instances where Butterfree is pink. One is in the anime, but the other is actually the shiny form of Butterfree in Generation 2, as you can see here. I wonder if what she means by seeing a pink Butterfree is that she once saw one in the past, or if that she saw it at the same place and time as the red Gyarados. If it's the latter, this could suggest that not only was Gyarados affected by the electromagnetic waves that forced it to evolve, but a Metapod as well. As I mentioned before, I don't think that makes much sense for a regular Pokemon to coincidentally share the same color as its shiny form when forced to evolve. However, considering how early this was in the Pokemon franchise, it might simply have been an oversight. Unobtainable decorations. In Gold, Silver and Crystal, we get the chance to decorate our bedroom with beds, carpets, ornaments and other items, some rarer than others. Nonetheless, there are 3 decorations that are impossible to get through normal means due to pseudo-random number generator limitations and oversights, and those are a Pikachu bed, a tentacle and an unknown doll. Johto Pokemon didn't exist in the past. This idea derives from the fact that when you use the time capsule to trade Pokemon from Gold, Silver and Crystal to Red, Blue and Yellow, you can't send Johto Pokemon to Gen 1. This is obviously because Gen 2 Pokemon aren't programmed in Gen 1 for very obvious reasons, but this led some people to believe that it's canon that Johto Pokemon didn't exist in the past or hadn't been discovered. I remember having watched the episode Mystery at the Lighthouse, where Bill explains that there might be more than 151 Pokemon to discover, and this could have made people believe that Johto Pokemon were just undiscovered. But now we know that Pokemon from different generations have existed at the same time and for a very long time. Talking about time traveling, it would be an amazing idea to introduce to Pokemon games not in the same way as Scarlet and Violet did, but actually being able to interact with the past and present, something similar to what happens with the Celebi event in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but more in depth. Unused Pichu variants. We're familiar with the Pikachu-colored and the Spiky-eared Pichu, but thanks to Shoko Nakagawa's autobiography, we learned that before Spiky-eared Pichu, a white Pichu was considered to appear. In fact, there are pictures of several forms of Pichu that could have made it into the game, but were discarded. Among them, we can see the white Pichu, a Pichu with a ribbon, and another one with a strange hairstyle. Prisman. In the June 1997 issue of CoroCoro magazine, we can find a Heracross-like Pokemon that was shown to promote a contest to create new Pokemon. This creature called Prisman was created by the CoroCoro staff, and it came with its own Pokédex entry that stated the following: the Crystal Beetle Pokemon, Bug type, height 1.4 meters, weight 48 kilograms. A new Pokemon that looks like a fusion between an insect and a gemstone. Its exact composition is unknown, but it is said to contain the same materials as meteorites from space, according to reports from the Pokemon Academy. The crystal-like parts of its body can let beams and light-based attacks pass right through, making them completely ineffective. However, it is weak against fighting type and physical attacks, as those can easily shatter its glass-like body. Moves: Dazzling Light, emits a blinding flash that confuses the opponent. Prism Attack, reflects light to strike multiple enemies. Crystal Laser, fires a powerful laser beam from its crystal body. Gorgeous Box. I remember that as a kid, I used to think that by completing the Pokédex in red, blue and yellow, you would get access to the mythical Pokémon Mew, but all you got was a diploma. With the release of Pokémon Stadium, and knowing that you could get some special Pokémon by winning specific tournaments, I thought that this would be a perfect opportunity to get the rarest of all Pokémon back then. However, nothing was farther from reality. I thought the greatest achievement in the game would be defeating Mewtwo in round 2, but apparently it was to have every single Pokémon featured in the Hall of Fame. This happens in a similar fashion to when you beat the Elite Four in the core series games. All the Pokémon in your party will be featured there once you beat certain challenges, but the problem is that it can take a really long time, on top of the fact that Pokémon Stadium is by no means an easy game. Once you complete one of the most tedious things in a Pokémon game ever, considering you sometimes have to include unevolved weak Pokémon in your team, you get access to a Psyduck with Amnesia. Newer generations may not be aware of how Amnesia worked in Gen 1, but basically it was a double Calm Mind, increasing both special attack and special defense by 2 stages. This happened because these 2 stats were included into one called Special. Besides, if you transfer this Pokémon to a Gen 2 game, it will be holding an item called Gorgeous Box. When you open it, you will get a gold trophy that you can display in your bedroom. Pokémon Center New York Event Distributions. It's interesting to think that event Pokémon distributions began as early as in Generation 1, but without a doubt, one of the most remarkable is that of the Pokémon Center New York that took place between late 2001 and early 2003. If you thought that Rayquaza with V-Create or Dragonite with Barrier were very special Pokémon, wait until you see some of these unique Pokémon. Ancient Power Bulbasaur, Zap Cannon Squirtle, Moonlight Nidoran Female, Petal Dance Psyduck, Bubble Magikarp, Barrier Porygon, Petal Dance Pichu, Mimic Wobbuffet. We've seen a lot of Pokémon with unexpected moves throughout the history of the franchise, but I think these, along with others from the same Gen 2 distribution, are quite unique. Sinjoh is a region of its own. I've spoken about the Sinjoh ruins, and we know that this place blends the ancient cultures of Sinnoh or Hisui and Johto. However, when we check our location in the map while being on these ruins, we can see that our character is north of Mount Silver, but where exactly? Considering that this place has never appeared on any map, we can conclude that the Sinjoh ruins belong to an unknown region. However, wherever this region may be, it is said to lie midway between Johto and Sinnoh. In Pokémon Legends Arceus, Old Verse 12 mentions that the Hisui region bears some resemblance to Sinjoh, implying that Sinjoh might actually be an entire region of its own. Early music in Gold, Silver and the remakes. In early 2020, a leaked copy of the source code of Gold and Silver was made public, and it contains a lot of interesting data. However, an amazing discovery was that of an early version of the Newburgh Town theme in the style of the Generation 1 games. Besides, an early version of the title screen music was found, dated July 30, 1999. Here are the themes. Also, just a year ago, development files for Pokémon Heart Gold and Soul Silver were leaked, containing a lot of information, including a lot of unused themes, some of them featuring the Diamond and Pearl sound font. Here are some of them. Aokigahara Forest in the Space World 97 demo. The Aokigahara Forest is an infamous place in Japan very close to Mount Fuji. This location may not ring a bell, but if you Google this, you'll find out what I'm really talking about. In the Space World 97 demo, we can find a map for the exterior of Mount Silver that allegedly represents the Aokigahara Forest. Considering that Mount Silver is based on Mount Fuji, the developers had to rework this area to avoid any reference to this infamous and sad place in Japan. Time Traveler Chieko. One of the most obscure Game Boy peripherals is the mobile Game Boy adapter. This was used to connect to a paid online service called Mobile System GB, and it allowed Japanese players of Pokémon Crystal to access a couple of interesting features. Through the Pokémon News machine at the Pokémon Communication Center in Goldenrod City, you could interact with a unique character called Chieko, a cool trainer from Azalea Town that also happens to be a time traveler. It makes sense because she would give the player the GS Ball after completing a quiz about events in your adventure. Nothing else is known about her, but I think that a character with the ability to travel in time would be a fantastic inclusion to the anime or the games. Ghost Girl in Gen 2 Glitch City. Glitch City became popular in Gen 1, but what I didn't know is that there was a Glitch City in Generation 2. However, something more interesting is that inside a very specific part of Glitch City in Pokémon Crystal, we can find a lonely NPC known as the Ghost Girl. All you have to do is to go to your bedroom in Pokémon Crystal, use a walkthrough walls cheat code, and save on this location. Reset your game and you will be in Glitch City. Follow this specific path and you'll be able to see a female trainer with a white skin tone known as the Ghost Girl of Glitch City. If the trainer spots you, the game will crash. It is rumored that this NPC could be the daughter of another NPC in Ecruteak City related to a scrapped side quest where a man is worried about his daughter going to the Burnt Tower, a place where, according to him, people tend to disappear. This is reinforced by the fact that when she spots you, the theme for the Burnt Tower starts playing. The unused text goes as follows. Oh no, my daughter is missing. No, she couldn't have gone to the Burnt Tower. I told her not to go near it. People seem to disappear there. Oh, what should I do? It's fascinating to see that within the game's data, there are still a couple of NPCs, such as the Ecruteak Pharmacy NPC, that lives in a parallel world within the game, completely isolated from the rest of the world. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel as well as to the Iceberg experience, where I explore more video game icebergs. If you're interested in becoming a YouTuber or a Poketuber, join the members of the channel, as I upload content that will help you on your journey as a content creator. See you in the next one.